Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Sophstar, a modern bullet hell loaded with value. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Banana Bites and publisher Red Art Games, Sophstar originally released to PC via Steam in February of 2022. In late October of 2022, it came to the PlayStation 4 and 5, the Xbox, and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today. So initially, this was a title that I was a bit lukewarm on, and, well, that's part of the reason it took me as long to get around to reviewing it as it has. But as I've played the game more and more, I've come to appreciate its systems, and I've had a rather good time with it. So I do feel it's worth checking out. With that said, let's dive into the game and see what we have on offer. So as I mentioned, the game itself has quite a bit of value to it, and you can see that initially with all the game modes you have available. So there's 6 different game modes, a lot of them what you would expect from a standard bullet hell. So you've got your main arcade mode, you have a score attack at a time challenge, but this one also adds an endless mode, an ultimate challenge, so which is basically kind of like challenging boss rush, and then a really unique cadet school. And this is one of the things that I've really enjoyed with the game itself. So the cadet school has all these challenges. There's 60 of them total, and you've got ones that are range from simply destroying a set number of enemies in a certain amount of time, surviving without being able to shoot or even teleport for a set amount of time, or just setting high scores. So it's really fun that there's all these different kind of challenges, and they will help you develop your skills in the game as well, which is always like valued. As one thing I do feel kind of weak is the tutorial just goes over the basics of your controls, and that's about it. You also do have a rather nice online leaderboard, so you can compete with others for score attack if that's what you're interested in. Starting in the arcade mode, we see yet another area where there's a bit of value to the game. So once you finish the game through, even if you're doing it on just the lowest difficulties, you'll unlock the advanced scoring. So there's a couple different scoring ways you can play the game, and that helps add to the whole online leaderboard score attack element that I feel this game has. But for our purposes today of the 6 difficulties we have available, I'll just pick Child as it's the easiest to kind of focus on talking about the gameplay. And now we have one of the areas where I feel this game truly shines. So there's 9 like incredible like to go and have that like large of a number of ships to choose from. 9 different fighters you can select from in this game, and each one offers its own unique twist on the gameplay. So you start off with the base Reika here, which we'll start with, and throughout the course of the gameplay I'll do my best to go and show off a couple of my other favorite fighters that are here. But each fighter has 3 main like unique elements to it. You've got a main weapon, which they're all different. You also have a sub-weapon, which is probably the most unique part of each ship, and a teleport. And a lot of the ships have a rather similar teleport, but some of them have really unique teleports that make them stand out for what they do. One thing that's also neat about the ship selection here, you've got pros and cons going by at the bottom, and for the most part I do agree with most of those pros and cons. They do a good job of telling you what the ship is good for and what it's not. So starting with the Reika, we start on stage 1. There is a fair bit of like a story that you can have between stages, but the options are really in depth. And before we get into the actual gameplay itself, just taking a quick look at some of the things you can change. So you can turn on and off the cutscenes. There's a hitbox. You can like turn on or off your teleport gauge. Damage flask, all these like features as far as like your options are concerned. We also have some great video options, including being able to change our borders, and there's a ton of filters, including several that you can unlock through the cadet school, as well as some other neat abilities like that are available to unlock throughout the course of that. And that's one thing that playing through cadet school will do for you, is get you unlocks. Just like flipping through some of the filters, there's things like scan lines, emboss, which like the menu looks terrible, but the gameplay itself is really interesting. And you just have some really neat stuff here, like Virtual Kid Red, but we'll keep it back to none just for the gameplay itself. Exiting back to the game, so we've got our main weapon, which in the case of the Reka is the Fire Blast here, and there's also a sub-weapon. So one thing that's important to note about the sub-weapon is it uses energy, and that energy gauge is displayed there in the bottom right. The blinking part of that meter there, which isn't necessarily the best graphic indicator, that's your power that it will use for using your sub-weapon. And for the Reka, this is the area clear. It's basically a screen-wide bomb, and you do have some momentary, well, it depends on the fighter, but there's some abilities that will give you some momentary, like, invulnerability, or in some cases, the invulnerability is, like, straight up what that skill does. And the last thing that the fighters do is they've got this awesome teleport. So in the case of the Reka here, it's just a pretty standard teleport that you can use twice. It's called the double dash. And then it has a charge period. Depending on like how powerful the particular teleport is, and even how controlled it can be, there'll be a short or a long cooldown involving the gauge around your ship filling up. So it does give you a pretty decent indication of that, and there's also an audio cue that says ready when your skill's ready. And as far as the Reka, that's basically what we have for our abilities. And here we have the second fighter I want to show off. So this is the Leo. The way that it's simply described in your ship selection is just shoot. So the weapon for the Leo is the homing missile. It will home in on the enemies, although sometimes in situations like this boss in particular, you can see that it might not be homing exactly where I would want it to. It's actually picking the boss in the top right that's the furthest from me. A bit of an odd choice, but we can use the bend of the shot to kind of like still hit the targets we're looking to hit. Then we also have this power shield as our sub-weapon. It doesn't burn through power as fast as like some of the other ships like sub-weapons, and it basically makes us invulnerable to damage while we're using it. And we can use our self to damage the enemies by running into them. And then the teleport on this one is super awesome. Black hole portal, which will warp out of the area with the teleport, and in our the place we left, it leaves behind this portal which sucks in enemy bullets as well as smaller enemies. Super awesome, but it does take a long time to recharge, and if you're looking for a high score attack, you're not going to find it by doing so, as the enemies that are sucked into that, you don't get the scoring point values that are available. Still, as far as like something that brings a different experience to the table, I feel that this particular fighter, the Leo, does a wonderful job of doing that. So that's our first stage boss. With that complete, we do have a couple end of stage like bonuses, and then we move on to the second stage. If you have the cutscenes turned on, you have some additional cutscenes, and we move on to stage 2. And here with the beginning of stage 2, I'll be showing off the last of the 3 fighters I wanted to feature in like this particular video. So this is the Nina. This fighter itself has a rather neat spread cannon for its main weapon, and its sub-weapon is a rather orthodox missile barrage. So the kind of thing you would see in shoot 'em up as a sub-weapon fairly frequently. But it does use a substantial amount of your energy in your energy bar. And it's a good time to go and like note that the energy bar itself recovers kind of automatically over time, but there are occasionally items like this that you can pick up to enhance that. So the F and the H that we're seeing, the F will go and fill it to full, the H will fill it half. You can also get points from the items that the enemies drop as well, so that's an important thing to keep your eye out for being able to increase your usage of your special weapon. As I was mentioning with the missile barrage here, you'll only be able to get a couple uses for it with the amount of energy that it takes with just a full bar. In addition to that, one of the things that I love about this particular fighter, I think actually it's the thing that I love the most, is its teleport. So the teleport on the Nina is the ghost drone, unless you find a good opportunity to use it here. What the ghost drone will do is when we use it, it leaves this shadow behind from where we warp from, and that shadow continues to be where our shots fire from. And even if we were to use our missile barrage, the missile barrage also launches from that point. It's really useful because you can leave your ghost right in the face of a large enemy or boss and just unload into them with both your main shot and the missile barrage, dealing a substantial amount of damage. It's just a really fun and unique way to play, and that's kind of what this game brings to the table. Is with so many different ships and playstyles, it brings a lot of interest into the game. Another one of the ships that I didn't feature, but I think is really fun to play, there's one that is teleport is basically kind of like a sword slash, and you're slashing your way through the enemies. It's the way that you would deal the best damage with that ship, and it's the recovery time for that teleport is almost instantaneous, whereas a ship like this one, the recovery time does take some time. And then we also have the scoring mechanic that this game has as well. It's a high risk, high reward kind of mechanic. So there's two ways that scoring works, at least in the original mode. So you've got a multiplier which increases for every enemy destroyed. In addition to that, every single time you destroy an enemy, they'll leave behind a crystal. In this case, it's original scoring green, or it's a golden crystal in the advanced scoring. And that crystal is worth more points the quicker you pick it up. So if you pick it up right after defeating the enemy, basically right in the enemy's face, it's worth 1,000 points, and it decays all the way to the point that it disappears. The crystals in advanced are worth more points, so upwards of like 5,000 points. But you also still have that same decay. As far as the score multiplier, when you defeat the enemies, in original scoring, it goes up to a multiplier of 9 and will stay there as long as you're defeating enemies quickly enough. The score multiplier is in the top right. When it fades from the top right, that's when the multiplier resets. In the advanced mode, there's not a cap to your multiplier, so as long as there's enemies on the screen, you can continue adding to the multiplier and get some big points. This is great for both scoring high scores, as well as getting additional 1-ups, as you do get a new life every 50,000 points. And so with that, you definitely do have some interesting options for high score runs. It's like, once again, one of the things that I think this game is does really well, and is just kind of a unique shoot 'em up to be able to try out, with all those different flavors being presented to you. But as far as the minus flavors are concerned, so I mentioned I was lukewarm on this title when I first played it, and one of the things that set that up for me is it just feels light as far as the way that your attack is. There's hardly any sound for your main shot, and at least when you're targeting enemies that take multiple hits, the sound that the shots make when it hits it almost feels like you're waving a fan or a feather duster at them. It just doesn't feel like there's much impact, and so that was the way that this game sat in my mind, is it just didn't have impact. And really it took a lot of playtime with it to go and feel that impact finally start to kind of weigh in, and even at still, it just feels a bit light to me, and it just comes from largely a sound design element, despite the fact that the enemy explosions are notable, and the sound effect for picking up the point items might be maybe even just a little bit too loud. sometimes. It just still, everything kind of just had a light feel, and kind of still does, a light feel to me. And then, like, for this stage, I do like the background for it, but a lot of them kind of just feel, like, relatively, like, samey, generic, and that doesn't help with that feeling of the game just being light. This one not as big of a complaint, but one thing that I do wish the game had was the ability to change ships between stages, as it would make the option of picking the right ship for a particular stage, or just getting a chance to try them all in a run, I think would be really fun. But as far as the plus flavors are concerned, I really do like the enemy designs as well as the ship designs. This one here, this boss here is actually a great example of an awesome boss design. And you also see a lot of like asymmetry and just unique non-orthodox spaceship designs in like the enemies that we're facing. I really like that. And then also ships. Having like 9 different ships to play through, that really is, or choose for playthroughs. That's like really what like brings like this game to the fore as far as being an awesome shoot 'em up to try. And then we have all those awesome game modes, the arcade mode, the endless mode, the ultimate mode, as well as the cadet school. Just brings a ton of value to what's already a fairly in-depth and long shoot 'em up. So with that said, I definitely do think that if you like what you see here, then this is one that I would recommend you try out, as there's just so much here to actually experience throughout the course of your time with it. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I hope you yourself have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.